Greetings, ladies and metalgens, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet, read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Experience, written by bellumaster. Labrinum looked down at the report before him. He was one of the many races in the Majesty, a plethora of beings with multitudes of different affinities and talents. He always did his best to be inclusive in his workforce that he employed, not, as some assumed, because of some mistaken bid or status, but instead due to the fact that he had simply found some beings more suitable to certain tasks than others. When he'd hired Sidqua on the manufacturing line, his competitors had cried folly, yet production was up. After bringing in Mendelov in the marketing department as a replacement for the previous expert, some had assumed it to be some sort of pity ploy. But suddenly, peer-to-peer recommendations had skyrocketed. The human before him had been his latest gamble. Her name was Loira, a classic example of her species. The conversation they'd had when she interviewed had sold him, and she'd come to work for them the very next day. She even insisted on working 6 whole hours per day. Within the week, she had done away with the decades-old clutter in the main office and converted the majority of their files to tactile filing system, perfect for him and his habits. She had smoothed over some rocky customer relations, made several small purchases that went towards heightening employee enjoyment, and in doing so, had increased productivity by some 20%. It was absurd. So when she had come into his office this morning and dropped off this estimate for the total restructuring of the system, Lebanon nearly signed off on it the moment it hit his desk. One thing kept his hand from his stylus. "Lyra," he began, unsure of how to breach the topic, "were you some sort of manager at your previous position? If it's legal for me to ask, that is. You need not answer if you don't want to." Lyra's mouth parted slightly, and she brushed a bit of hair back about her ear. "Well, it is illegal, but I don't mind answering. I wasn't a manager, never been one, but I suppose I would like to." Lebanon gestured at the proposal on his desk. "How did you learn to do all of this? I've been working at this job since the previous owner passed it to me some 60 years ago. Why is it that you know how to optimize it so well? What taught you?" Laura looked up at the side and pursed her lips. I've worked as a maid, a nanny, a teacher, but I decided it wasn't for me. Then I went to university while working in hospitality. Once I got my degree, I worked in marketing, then as a financial advisor, and my last job was a dental assistant. I probably missed a few things, though. Lebanon gaped at her. "That is, several lifetimes worth of experience. And do humans live very long? Were the jobs all in this district as well?" Lyra chuckled and waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, no. We don't live that long at all compared to you lot. I came from off-planet. This is the 3rd district I've lived in. I like it very much. I think I might stay." Lebanon slunk back in his seat, mind whirling. How many places have you lived in?" 9 or 10, I suppose. "And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?" 38. I'm a bit of an old maid, but that suits me just fine." Lebanon didn't spare processing power to figure out her lingo, discounting the human's trial period, which ended at, say, 14 to 16 years of age. That put Lyra as having shifted through the least 9 living spaces and at least 7 jobs for a tentative average of a different job every 3 or so years and different living situations every 2.5. Lebanon felt dizzy. "Isn't that exhausting? Can't you just go to the Great Directory and pick one?" "Oh, I could do that if I wanted, but I don't want to. I like seeing different places and doing different things. It's almost like a brand new lifetime when I change, with new species, new people, new work, new me." Lebanon felt a distinct sense of vertigo. He'd been living in the same place and working the same job for so long that he'd even forgotten how old he was. He couldn't imagine living a different life, though he knew it was possible. He motioned weakly at the proposal. "And, how did this come about?" Lyra nodded excitedly. "Well, obviously I can clean, and being a maid let me see a lot of different file storage systems. When I was a nanny, I brushed up on a lot of the behavioral patterns of most commonly encountered species. Well, my teaching experience has honestly made me a bit, critical of how some employees teach their employees. I learned how to people please and brand marketing. The financial advisory should be fairly obvious, and when I was a dental assistant, I learned a lot about streamlining different processes. She rolled both her hands about her head. So I figured that with permission, I'd take everything I'd learned and make this place a little nicer. I like it here in this district, and the people here are great. Why not try and make the place better? Lebanon sat for a moment, silent. Then for another moment. Then another. Lyra shifted, uncomfortable. Did I say something wrong? Lebanon snapped out of his calculations, regardless of what occurred here and now. His company was secure. Nothing short of a planet-wide quarantine for several years would threaten it. If he was known for anything by those in his field, it was his adventurous taste in employees and willingness to try new things. Lebanon couldn't bear to pass up the opportunity. Lyra, would you like to be promoted to manager? Her eyes grew wide. What? I thought you didn't have one. I've been made aware of my company's shortcomings. Would you like to be promoted? It comes with a pay raise and a secretary to fulfill your old position's duties. Now it was her turn to gape. I suppose so, yes, that would be great, actually. Lebanon nodded and then leaned down and signed off on the proposal. You can expect the paperwork next week, and your input will be required for hiring a new secretary. Please do everything you can to make this company better. Thank you very much, Lebanon. I'll do my best. He asked one more question as she turned to leave his office. How do you do it, Lyra? Having so many different lives, moving to so many different places. She smiled halfway out the door. The hardest part is leaving. After that, it's just living. If you ever move to another planet with only a suitcase, you'll know what I mean. Lebanon muted his calls for the next half an hour so that he could have silence in which to think. He looked over at the picture that had been on the office wall for as long as he could remember. It was a detailed rendition of a moon, one of the architectural wonders of the Varium, built from the inside out as a massive scientific experiment. It was currently a museum destination where one could spend years looking over the various scientific advances from hundreds of different races. Beneath it were words that had carried him through years, no, decades of work. It is only impossible until it is done. Lebanon thought of the suitcase in the storage unit of his apartment, untouched since its purchase all those years ago. Maybe it was time for a little vacation. End of story. Story number 2. Distinguishing Characteristics, written by MarlynnOfMany. The hard-skinned crew stepped off the ramp onto a more rock-strewn ground than any of them had been expecting. The spaceport was on an undesirable outskirts, and there had apparently been a spill. Wherever they looked, insect-like workers picked up rocks one at a time to pile into carts. Not much progress had been made. The hover truck was still on its side, where it had made a sharp turn, and the rocks were everywhere. Even the landing spaces were a mess. The hard-skinned pilot had been forced to hover in place and use the ship's external arm to clear the ground before landing. She could have used a repulsive blaster instead, but that would have scattered the rocks against other ships. No self-respecting hardskin would be so careless. The three of them stepped carefully now, with the small mother in the lead, picking their way towards the payment terminal. Falling on this kind of surface wouldn't make a dent in their exoskeletons, but they had an image to maintain. When they passed the hover truck, they had become aware of a hubbub on the other side. Someone large was facing off with someone small, and at least one voice was raised. The workers were studiously ignoring it. With the concerned rattle of her back plates, the small mother urged the crew to stay close. They paused to assess the danger before moving further. The large, yelling person was of a race that called themselves the Mighty. They were indeed large and endowed with both muscles and sharp teeth, but no one else called them that. Hardskins privately referred to them as the false armor, since despite their bluster, their large beings were protected only by thin scales, nothing truly deserving of their name. In public, the best they could bring themselves to say was the Armorlight. This particular Armorlight was shouting down at a much smaller being, one softer in all regards. There was not a single hard thing about this one, from round ears to large eyes to long fluffy things that served as limbs. More than one hard skin had been known to describe these folk as those made of intestines, but it was not polite. All-tail was a better term. The all-tail crouched in front of the Armalite, quivering limbs clustered around something that may have been a payment chit. Given the Armalite's words, it had to be currency of some kind. "I said that's my parking space," the hulking creature growled, gesturing to the ship that the all-tail had come from. "Now, if you don't want something bad to happen to your ship, you had better pay up." The all-tail was protesting about the many empty spaces and the clear signs proclaiming them as open to the public when someone else entered the scene. Slender and armless, the being approached from one of the outbuildings wore the kind of body coverings favored by many without natural protection. The small mother's quick eyes noted a pattern on this covering that matches the one on the side of the ship. A crewmate of the all-tail, then, a somewhat mysterious one. The small mother and her crew had not met one of this race before, only heard of them. Like many isolated species, the narrow creatures called themselves a name that translated as us, not very helpful. And to the small mother's knowledge, no consensus had been reached on what would be a good name for them. So far, everyone was simply using the untranslated sound, human. The small mother had barely gotten her thoughts together to wonder if she could learn more about the race today when she saw the human do something extraordinary. It picked up one of the spilled rocks, moving it up and down as if testing its gravity, then leaned back and spun its arm in the most improbable way. The rock flew as it launched by the ship's takeoff exhaust and hit the Armalite solidly in the back of the head. The hardskins instinctively curled a bit when the Armalite roared, but its anger was not for them. "Who did that? You? How dare you?" The tirade was interrupted by a second rock, and then a third. "Ah! You'll pay for... How?" "Go shake down somebody else," shouted the human, scooping up more rocks. "I can do this all day." It didn't take the Armalite long to decide on a tactical retreat, with the promise to return with friends who would beat the smaller creature into a smear on the ground. It stomped off, its face visibly swelling. The human stopped throwing, but didn't put the rocks down until the threat was out of sight. Only then did it hurry to check on its crewmate. Cheers of approval from the insect-like workers startled the hardskins, who joined in after a moment. It had been impressive. "Well done," shouted one worker. "He had it coming. You'll probably want to clear off, though, before he comes back with his sisters. They're bigger than he is." "No worries," the human called back. "I turned on the external cameras when I left our shuttle earlier. They'll have the recording of him trying to rob my friend here. I think we'll clear off in the direction of the local authorities." The workers were more than happy to give directions. By the sounds of it, the Armalite was something of a local pest. The human and the all-tail said their goodbyes and boarded the ship, which took off as soon as they were inside the door. The workers went back to moving rocks, without more than a glance at the wide-eyed hardskins. The small mother conferred with the others. They had information to submit for consideration in naming the new species. Humans could throw with astonishing speed and precision. Their arms moved in ways that a hardskins never could. And they were smart, too. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnold, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Light Jock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Asrical. Thank you very much.